This represents a major shift for the San Antonio Spurs, as not only did Stephon Castle put the whole league on notice, but something behind the scenes about Victor Wembanyama and Chris Paul's doings at the All-Star game has the Spurs moving forward looking even better than we could have anticipated. We got to talk about not so much what went down, but the big implications of Victor Wembanyama's actions, what he had to say, and Stephon Castle, his actions, and what the NBA world is saying about this. All of the implications on that on the Spurs coming up on this episode of Spurs Digest. And I want to start off with something very interesting here. So, look, we all saw what happened yesterday. We saw the hilarious stuff with Chris Paul, Victor Wembanyama. I'm not going to dive into the reaction to that, but just I want to point out something very interesting. So, first off, this tweet coming from Michael C. Wright saying, source said San Antonio flew its massage therapist to San Francisco, along with the physical therapist and performance coach to put Wemby through his usual pregame routine, even for the skills challenge, because he takes it so seriously. So, first off, right, everyone was talking about how this was Chris Paul. How this had to be Chris Paul. This feels like the most Chris Paul thing ever. Turns out, it looked like it may have been Wemby's idea to do this whole skipping the shooting thing, but also the fact that he's taking it this seriously, like not only trying to find the best strategy to win, but stretching, doing all this stuff. This is very interesting. Like, we're seeing stuff come out today as well, like Jokic laughing at Victor Wembanyama bringing a book to the All-Star game. This level of seriousness, while, you know, is made for jokes in the NBA sphere right now. Oh, haha, these guys did this funny thing. Yeah, whatever. Oh, look, Wemby's reading a book, whatever. But this shows something bigger to me. Like, this shows just how locked in our guys are just for even something like this, the All-Star Skills Competition. And Chris Paul was fully on board with it. And it's not just him. Like, look, we even got Stephon Castle. You know he's there on Wemby's side. He wore Wemby's jersey walking into the All-Star game today. And I'm recording this before the All-Star game stuff has happened. Maybe you're watching it before. Maybe you're watching it during or after. I don't know. But regardless, this trio right here has something very special in the making. And when I say this represents a major shift, let me just talk about a little bit what I mean. So, again, right now, yes, last night, it was you know, Stephon Castle, like, yeah, he lost to Mac McClung. Most people were kind of saying, it's probably okay, but, you know, not everyone. Because I'm going to be honest, Castle's dunks were way cleaner than Mac McClung's. Yeah, he used the props, it was cool, it was fun, it was different, but Stephon Castle was doing stuff with no props, and they were sick dunks anyway. And look, it wasn't just me saying this. My favorite player of all time, probably a lot of your guys' favorite player of all time, Manu, probably biased, and I admit McClung's amazing, but Steph deserved the win in my humble opinion. You guys agree? Let me know. And this is what I'm talking about. So not only is like Chris Paul and Wemby doing their thing, getting the NBA talking about the Spurs even more. We even heard Ant say this weekend about how, you know, Wemby's probably the future face of the league. This talk is increasing every single day. KD putting Wemby as his top guy to win a one-on-one tournament. But the rest of the NBA, and, you know, former legends, I know Manu's a Spurs legend, but it's not just him. Even guys like Kevin O'Connor, some other Spurs fans, a lot of people on Twitter were saying, like, hey, Castle got robbed. That respect is now coming to the San Antonio Spurs, and specifically, you know, it was already kind of there for Wemby and for Chris Paul to a large degree, but specifically for Stephon Castle. And moving forward, I think this does have big implications on the Spurs, because Mitch Johnson has said how he wants to try out different lineups after the All-Star break. And we're seeing the publicity that Stephon Castle is now getting for this All-Star game performance, or well, this All-Star, you know, Saturday night performance, I should say. The recognition him and the rest of the Spurs are getting. Eyes are coming to the Spurs more and more, and while a lot of them never really left, a lot of the core fans, anyone that was a big fan of the Big Three, when they retired, Spurs got not so great, you know, they're maybe tuning back in for Wemby. But we're on the big stage again. Like, when was the last time you had this much fun with Spurs on an All-Star Saturday night? Like, it's crazy, right? The hype around the Spurs is becoming real. And Stephon Castle is not only making a name for himself in the NBA sphere, but he's making a name for himself to be the starter down the stretch. And that also comes with this Chris Paul camaraderie. We saw these guys talking together. We saw Paul there for Stephon Castle. We got that Spurs brotherhood, like Manu shouting him out. Even Chris Paul saying he loves coming down to this All-Star Saturday night to help out Wemby, to help out Stephon. And Stephon Castle is not only doing this with the publicity, he's doing it with his stats, right? You look at the last 10 games, everything's going right for this guy. In the Spurs' last 10 games, Victor Wembanyama is leading the team in points per game. There's no surprise there, 23 a game, and he's played 9 of the Spurs' last 10, and Fox has played in 5 of their last 10, because that's when they acquired him. He's only played 5 games since coming to the Spurs. Those are the 2 points leaders. But who's right after that? Oh, I mean, Stephon Castle. And look at the field goal percentage. In the Spurs' last 10 games, Stephon Castle is averaging about 4.5 fewer points than Wemby on better shooting. I know it's close. It's 47.4 to 47.1, but just let that sink in, right? Like, Stephon Castle is shooting 47.5% from the field over his last 10 games, averaging 18.5 points per game. Not to mention, his three-point efficiency is, I believe, around or even above 40% during that. You might have to check, because I know there's some bad shooting games in there, but it's definitely at least high 30s, but I believe it's in the 40s in his three-point shooting percentage over those last 10. So again, his play on the court is meriting it as well. So right now, like, all the eyes are on Stephon Castle. This is a big shift for the Spurs because post All-Star break, we know traditionally the last couple of years, the Spurs have really put in their best lineups every single night post All-Star break to try and win. And as we look at their schedule down the stretch, like, look, the Spurs have a little ground to make up, right? They're 20 games back, and right now they're 5 games back of a playoff spot. However, you got a team like Dallas right there in a playoff spot, which is like, they're probably going to be free falling right now. I mean, Davis is going to miss a bit, but Daniel Gafford's out for a while. I don't want to crap on Dallas too much. They've taken enough. But even a team like the Kings, they lost De'Aaron Fox. Yeah, they got Levine, but I think the Spurs can outpace them to the tune of, 3.5 games down the rest of the season. Well, the Spurs are, 55 games in? There's 27 games left. It's very possible the Spurs can climb right into a playoff spot, and their next stretch of games, well, it's against a lot of opponents that I would say are, these are winnable games. The Suns just one spot ahead of them in the standings. The Pistons, while they are pretty good this year, I mean, they're still not a big powerhouse team. They're still quite young, and the Spurs could definitely take advantage. Back-to-back games against the Pelicans, who just lost Ingram. The Grizzlies and Rockets and Thunder, tough games, especially the Thunder, but definitely winnable. And then the Nets again, who are kind of depleted. So it's like the Spurs right now over their next 8, 5 extremely winnable games, I would say. 2 games that they easily could win, and then a game against the Thunder, which, I don't want to say is a loss, but it's going to be tough. Again, look, I guess Memphis is also quite high up there, but, these are games the Spurs could win if things bounce right. So moving forward for the rest of the season, the Spurs have a chance to really make a playoff spot. Stephon Castle has put his name at the forefront of a lot of conversations around the Spurs, not only from within the team, but from all around the NBA. And the camaraderie now that he's shown with Chris Paul, you have to just wonder, what are we doing on this front, right? Like, at what point, could this even be changing for Chris Paul? There's been all this talk about how the Spurs need to honor this contract, this handshake deal they had with him. So he starts all the games, in this, what may be his final season, maybe not. He looks like he could have another season or 2 in him. But do we honor that? This and that? He seems to be good friends with Castle. We'll have to look at the Spurs down the stretch because I think Chris Paul wants to win more than anything. Do I think the Spurs have a legit chance at a ring this year? Look, if I'm being realistic, probably not, but we've seen crazier things, in the history of the NBA. It's not the craziest thing. I'm not going to get ahead of myself. Let's be honest, it's probably not going to happen, but I do think there's maybe more chance now than ever that we start to see Stephon Castle creeping into that starting lineup alongside De'Aaron Fox and have Chris Paul take that super point guard bench role. Maybe that's just speculation. Maybe that's just some hopium. But right now, things are just looking great. They're looking better than I could have ever anticipated coming out of this All-Star weekend. And this is recorded before the All-Star game. So maybe Wemby does something insane as well. We'll have to wait and see. But thank you all for tuning into this episode of Spurs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. We're so close to 5,500 subs. We're less than 100 away. So if you want to help us out, hit that subscribe button. It's completely free down below. I've been your host, Josh Gosse, and I'll catch you in the next one.